Hi, I'm Marco Arment, and I'm going to review the new Apple 15-inch MacBook Pro with Touch Bar. This machine is kind of the workhorse of many industries, and it's always been my workhorse. I've always loved the 15-inch line for the amount of power you get in just a really nice small package. It's really incredible. First of all, you'll notice there's a pretty noticeable but not massive weight difference. It's a little bit lighter, it's a little bit thinner. And compared to the old one, which I have here, you know, these are both light machines. It's not a huge difference between the two, honestly. They're also both thin machines. Again, you don't really notice the thinness difference. You do notice the weight difference, but it isn't a huge difference. It's not like going from a 15-inch to a MacBook Air. It's a nice welcome change. Now, they did make it, you know, appreciably thinner, but I don't really care about the thinness so much because, you know, the last one was pretty thin too. I care about the lightness. That's welcome. The thinness, you know, it seems like Apple's doing that mostly for its own sake these days. But, you know, I'll take it as long as it doesn't come with huge trade-offs. Unfortunately, there are a few, and we'll get to that, but lightness is very much appreciated. Now, onto the amazing display. It's a nice big 15-inch Retina screen. It's not that different looking from the 2012 model. It's still the same resolution. Apple's now shipping it in the downscaling mode where it crams more space into the screen and then it shrinks it down to the actual resolution of the panel, which is one step lower than this. I don't love this because that shrinking process makes it look a little bit blurry, and that's not great. I'm not a huge fan of that. It doesn't look as nice as it could. I wish Apple would just actually increase the resolution of the panel itself to 2x 1680, which is what they're simulating here. Other PC laptops have screens that are that high resolution, so I'm pretty sure it's possible. They just didn't for whatever reason, and I really wish they would, because this screen looks great at its native resolution of 1440 points across, but at the scaling resolution that it ships with, which is what I think most people will use, it doesn't look as good as it could. Now, the keyboard and trackpad are interesting. The new keyboard is this new shallow one, very similar to the one on the 12-inch MacBook, which is very controversial, kind of divisive. I don't love this keyboard. It also sounds a little bit weird. It sounds a little bit like clunky, if that makes sense. It's not a good sound. It sounds a little bit cheap, and it's kind of loud. It's almost as loud as if somebody in your office has a clicky keyboard and you hate them because they're in the cubicle next door or whatever and you hear it all the time. It's almost that loud. And so to have that on this mainstream laptop is a little unfortunate. It is a little bit better feeling than the 12-inch MacBook keyboard. It's just enough of a difference that I don't hate it, but I still don't like it. And keyboards are mostly empty space, so they didn't need to make the keyboard terrible to make the laptop lighter. They just needed to make it terrible to make the laptop thinner. And again, thinness, you know, we weren't really asking for that. We like lighter, but you didn't need to kill the keyboard usefulness to make it lighter. So it's fine. I've already gotten used to it. I don't like it though. The new trackpad is a much nicer story. The trackpad is huge. I mean, look at this. It's ridiculous. It is almost as big. It is almost as big as this Magic Trackpad that I have from my desktop. It is ridiculous how big this thing is. But it is the Force Touch kind, so you click it and it's not the real click, it's a fake click. And I don't like that so much because those fake clicks, they don't feel like good clicks to me. It doesn't feel like a good trackpad button. It feels like a crappy trackpad button. So instead, I have switched over to be a tap-to-click person, which I've never done in my entire computing career. Now I'm a tap-to-click person because it is just as reliable as the Force Touch trackpad, which is most of the time, but not all of the time. It's faster and requires less pressure, and it doesn't have that weird fake click feeling and fake click sound. So I've converted to that. It's fine. As for the touch bar, this is interesting. This is the new hotness of this year's model. This new touch bar across the top here. I don't think when it's just a big row of buttons, I don't think that works very well because then you have to look at it instead of just kind of inherently moving it. When it's a slider, you can tap it and then you can look at the main screen as you slide it up and down. That is way more useful than having to look down at a row of buttons and find the right button for you every time, because then you're taking your eyes off the screen and that's no good. But overall, touch bar is pretty good. Certain apps, it's better than others. I find the emoji bar that a lot of people use is okay, but you have to swipe through so many emojis, it's kind of not useful if what you want isn't on that very first page. But overall, it's fine. I would say we still have a long time to go before we really know how good the Touch Bar is in practice. We have some idea now from Apple's apps, and it's good. I'm actually really glad they've done as much as they have. It really shows more commitment to the Mac platform than I think we've been expecting and fearing recently. So that's really good. It's still kind of gimmicky and kind of experimental right now. We're going to see, I think, over the next few years as Apple and developers really figure out how to use it well. Instead of just what can we do, we'll figure out what should we do and what works best. That's really nice. Touch ID is awesome. It is so nice to be able to just lock and unlock the laptop with Touch ID, to be able to use Apple Pay for online shopping. Now, if you run any kind of online store, you really want to make sure you support Apple Pay, because it honestly makes me buy things more because there's less friction. It's so much faster than just entering stuff manually. You want to support Apple Pay, and as a user, as a customer, it's fantastic. So let's talk about the ports. Now, obviously, this has dropped the old ports in favor of the USB-C, and there's 2 on this side, 2 on this side, and a headphone jack. One of them you're going to have to use for the charging cable. So basically, most of the time you have 3 USB-C ports. USB-C ports are really great. They can be used for anything. Unfortunately, they're currently used for just about nothing, so you need to buy adapters, and lots of adapters, and you need to carry all these adapters. And so there's additional cost, additional hassle. There's going to be the times when you're going to need a certain adapter that you're just not going to have with you, or you're not going to own. And it's nice that you can convert all these ports to pretty much whatever you want. It'll be a great future. That future isn't here yet. So that'll be great when it comes. But again, we're not there yet. And in the meantime, Apple has just really created a lot of problems for which the solution is to go to the Apple Store and spend $40. So that's not great. I don't love that. But overall, we'll get there. It'll be, we'll get there eventually. The power cable, I don't love. So the old power cable, it had this little MagSafe connector that was really nice when you plug it into the side, so that way if you trip over the cable, this would break off and your laptop wouldn't fall on the ground. It folded into this nice little brick, and it had these little arms on the side that you could wrap the cable around. And then, at the end of the cable, it had this little clip, so that you can clip it right on and it stays right where you put it. And then you could pack this neat little thing in your bag. The new power adapter has basically none of those luxuries. It's the same size brick, so that's fine, but there's no cable management built in, and this part comes off, which is nice, so you can replace this part. That's welcome, because a lot of people would, wrap the cable too tightly and would fray the ends or whatever else, because Apple doesn't believe in proper strain management. So this part is nice that it comes off, that this part's replaceable. You can get a different length of this. Maybe you can even get a third-party version of this, because this is now a standard, and that's all welcome. However, there aren't any good third-party ones yet, especially at this 85-watt level that the 15-inch requires. And this is just kind of a mess when you're packing it. There's no cable management, there's no more arms, there's no more little clip on the end, so you have to pack this giant mess cable somehow, and it's kind of like packing just a giant iPad cable, but the cable's really thick and it's kind of stiff, and this is no good for me. I miss all the little delights and nice details of the old one. The new one, it does bring some of those benefits of standardization, but would it have killed Apple to make just a nicer one? Like, standardization could still be the case, and Apple could also have a nicely organized, nicely designed power brick again. They didn't. They cut all that stuff out, and I miss that. That really does impact the everyday practicality and niceness of this computer to have this big mess of a charging cable. So let's get back to the MacBook Pro. Performance is pretty good. I would say it performs about as well as a mid to high spec iMac, and that's good. The MacBook Pro, the 15-inch MacBook Pro, usually performs about as well as an iMac. The SSD is way faster than the new one, and you'll feel that kind of in everyday stuff. It's not going to be like a massive, everything all of a sudden you're going to be like, wow, this is so much faster. It's going to be a nice gain in most things. Some things will benefit more than others, but overall you'll feel the fast SSD. The GPU is also faster. The processor, though, is about the same, really, as it was before. So if you're coming from something that 2014 or earlier, you might see a small gain. If you're coming from 2014, 2015, the gain is smaller. As for heat and fan noise, this is one area where they've made a large improvement. You can actually max out the processor for a good few minutes before the fans even become audible. And then when they are audible, it's actually still a quieter level than it was before. So whatever they've done with the cooling system is really incredible, and that should really be commended. It is substantially quieter in general than the old one, and that's really nice. The one big downside to me is battery life. This depends a lot on what you're doing. Apple quotes 10 hours. Nothing I have done has reached 10 hours. And you could say whatever you want about what kind of user I am, but basically what happened is, to make this new laptop, to make it thinner, to make it lighter, Apple's using Intel's new Skylake generation of processors. Skylake brings a lot of power savings, but mostly only when the computer's doing very little, when the processor is mostly idle. So because of that, that's most of the time. So Apple thought it was, warranted to shrink the battery by 25%. Because if you want to make a computer thinner, lighter, smaller, you have to basically shrink the battery. Batteries take up a lot of space, and batteries are by far the heaviest component in a computer most of the time. So you need to make the battery smaller. So Apple took these Skylake idle power savings and applied it to making the battery 25% smaller. That's entirely why this is a ½ pound lighter. But as soon as you make the processor do any work, if you launch an app that uses a little more power or renders some animations on screen or whatever else, as soon as that processor is really doing much of anything really, it's going to use about the same amount of power it did before. So you basically have, under very, very light workloads, with that 25% battery reduction and the Skylake power savings, you now have about the same battery life, about 10 hours. But as soon as you make the computer do anything, you're going to actually have less battery life than you had before, because it's using just as much power as it did before when it's under a moderate or high workload. On the new one, I'm getting about 6 or 7 hours of light use instead of 10, and about 4 or 5 hours of heavier use, like Xcode development, instead of 7. And that's unfortunate. This now means that I can't get through a cross-country flight on battery power. And that is really disappointing, especially because the previous model could. So battery life overall, I'm not happy with, unfortunately. But overall, the new MacBook Pro is better than the old one for most uses in most ways. In a few big ways, like the keyboard, the real-world practicality of these ports, and more importantly, what's missing, and the price, it's a lot higher than the previous one for most configurations. So in the real world, it is kind of a step backwards in these big areas. But overall, it is a nicer computer, I'd say, than the old one. But again, I kind of wish that we didn't have to make these steps backwards in these major areas in order to make that progress. I am very happy to see the Touch Bar. The innovation that brought is nice. It shows that the Mac is not forgotten at Apple, and that's really great. The Touch Bar was a lot of work, you can tell, and that's really great to see. I kind of miss the day when a good keyboard was non-negotiable. I always had all the ports I needed on my Pro laptop, and my power cable wasn't a mess, and battery life only ever got better, not worse, over time. But we'll see what happens over time. I hope Apple fixes those things as best as they can, because overall, this is better, and I like this. And I'm glad to see Apple focusing on the Mac again after what seemed like a period of not doing much. So anyway, thanks for watching. This is my first video review, so let me know what I can do better. I have a lot to learn. Thank you very much again, and I'll see you next time.